welcome to Nocturnal Tales. Tonight we travel to wartime Worcestershire, where four boys hunting for birds' nests put a hand inside a hollow witch elm and find a human skull. And where, a few miles away, a grieving baronet has already summoned Hercule Poirot about something quite different and far older. The secret of the bell tree is a mystery of a boy's private code, a governess who vanished 21 years ago, a bell that answers from the woods, and the terrible ease with which grief persuades honest people to stop asking questions. As always, this tale is inspired by the spirit of the great Golden Age crime writers, but the plot, characters, and text you're about to hear are entirely our own creation, though the historical epilogue at the end draws on the real case of Bella in the Witch Elm, which has baffled Britain since the spring of 1943. To hear this entire mystery ad-free and to unlock next week's case early, join our inner circle on Patreon for just $2.99 a month. The direct link is the very first one in the description below. Now, settle in as Poirot and Hastings follow a muddy track between the beaches. A village constable takes off his helmet, and an old tree gives up what it has been holding for 21 years. Chapter 1. The Tree That Whispered. There are places which appear sinister only after something dreadful has happened there. Hagley Wood was not one of them. It had possessed from the first an air of knowing too much. The trees grew close together upon the rising ground, their branches interlocking overhead like the fingers of conspirators. Even at midday the paths were dim, and the wind, when it came, seemed unable to move freely among them. It crept instead through the undergrowth in narrow currents, stirring one patch of dead leaves while everything around it remained perfectly still. I remarked upon this to Poirot. He glanced at me sideways. "You find the wood unpleasant, Hastings?" "I find it gloomy." "Ah, that is not the same thing." "It amounts to much the same thing when one is ankle-deep in mud." Poirot paused to inspect the polished toe of his shoe, upon which a quantity of Worcestershire soil had attached itself with almost personal malice. "There are," he said, "many forms of unpleasantness. The war had brought us to Hagley in the spring of 1943, though not, as I had initially supposed, on official business. Poirot had received a letter 3 days earlier from an old acquaintance, Sir Claud Wychbury, whose estate bordered the northern edge of the wood. The letter had been brief. "My dear Poirot, I require your discretion more than your celebrated intelligence. Something has occurred here which may prove to be nothing. Nevertheless, I would be easier if you came. C.W." That was all. I had expected Poirot to dismiss it. He disliked vague invitations, country mud, rationed railway meals, and aristocrats who considered punctuation beneath them. Instead, he had folded the letter and said, "We leave tomorrow." Now, as we followed a narrow track between the beaches, I wondered whether Sir Claude's request had anything to do with the military depot recently established beyond the estate. Twice we had been stopped on the road by Home Guard patrols. The surrounding district was full of rumours: enemy parachutists, coded wireless signals, lights flashing from hillsides after dark. War made spies of every stranger and prophets of every fool. Yet I could not rid myself of the feeling that whatever troubled Sir Claude was older than the war. Ahead of us walked a thin young man in a tweed coat, carrying a lantern despite the pale afternoon light. His name was Andrew Mercer, Sir Claude's secretary. He had met us at Hagley Station with the solemnity of an undertaker. He had spoken very little during the drive. "Is it much farther?" I called. Mercer stopped. For several seconds he did not turn around. "No," he said, "not far." There was something in his voice which caused Poirot to look up sharply. We continued. The track narrowed until we were obliged to walk in single file. Thorn branches caught at my coat. Somewhere among the trees a bird gave a sudden harsh cry, then fell silent. At last Mercer stepped aside. Before us stood an ancient wych elm. It was larger than the surrounding trees and seemed somehow separate from them, as though the wood had grown around it but never accepted it. Its trunk was twisted and swollen, divided by a deep black opening several feet above the ground. Someone had tied a length of rope between two nearby trees to keep people back. A village constable stood beyond it, shifting uneasily from foot to foot. Poirot looked from the tree to Mercer. "This," he said, "is what Sir Claud wished me to see." Mercer's mouth tightened. No, Sir Claud did not know about this when he wrote. I felt a chill unrelated to the weather. What happened? The constable removed his helmet. 4 boys came through here yesterday afternoon, sir, looking for birds' nests. One of them climbed the tree. He nodded towards the dark opening. He put his hand inside. The rest of the sentence did not appear willing to leave his mouth. Poirot approached the rope but did not cross it. And what did the boy find? The constable glanced into the trees, as if fearful that someone might be listening. A skull. No one spoke. The wind moved again, but only inside the hollow tree. I heard a dry whispering sound from within the trunk. Mercer extinguished his lantern. The little flame vanished, though I had not realized until then how closely I had been watching it. "A woman," the constable continued. "They believe it was a woman. The rest of her was inside." He spoke quietly, without embellishment, and it was this restraint which made the words worse. I looked at the opening in the elm. It seemed impossible that anyone could have placed a body there. The gap was narrow, the trunk solid and old. Yet as I stared, the darkness inside appeared to deepen, receding far beyond the dimensions of the tree. "How long?" Poirot asked. "Perhaps 18 months, perhaps longer." "And her identity?" "Unknown." Poirot's eyes remained fixed upon the hollow. "Was she clothed?" "Some remnants, a shoe, a wedding ring, nothing with a name." "And the cause of death?" The constable hesitated. "They found cloth in her mouth." Mercer turned abruptly away. Poirot noticed. "So?" he said softly. "This is not merely a death hidden by time. It is a silence arranged deliberately." The constable cleared his throat. "There is another matter." From his pocket he removed a folded sheet of brown paper and handed it across the rope. Poirot opened it. It contained a pencil copy of words written in large, uneven letters. "Who put Bella in the wych elm?" I read them twice. "Bella," I said, "then someone knows her name." "Or wishes us to believe they do," said Poirot. "Where was this found?" "On a wall near Birmingham. Chalked there during the night. The police photographed it this morning." I stared at the message. The question was childish in its simplicity, almost sing-song, yet it affected me more deeply than any formal threat might have done. It was not a plea for justice. It was not an accusation. It sounded like a taunt. Poirot refolded the paper with great care. "Who besides the police knows of the discovery?" "The boys, their families, Sir Claud, the estate staff. And the newspapers? Not yet." Poirot turned to Mercer. "Your employer wrote to me before the body was found. Why?" Mercer's face had become very pale. From somewhere deeper in the wood came 3 knocks. Slow, hollow, evenly spaced. The constable looked towards the trees. "What was that?" No one answered. Then Andrew Mercer said, almost inaudibly, "That is why Sir Claud wrote." Poirot faced him. Mercer's eyes remained fixed on the elm. "For the past 6 nights," he said, "someone has been walking through the wood after midnight." "How do you know?" "Because each morning there are footprints beneath this tree." The knocking came again. 3 measured blows from somewhere we could not see. Mercer lowered his voice. "And every night," he said, "the footprints begin at the house." He looked at Poirot. "But none of them lead back." Chapter 2. The Footprints from Witchbury House. Andrew Mercer led us away from the elm without looking back. The constable remained behind, a solitary figure beneath the tangled branches, while the 3 of us followed the path towards Witchbury House. No one referred to the knocking. In daylight, men often treat what they cannot explain as though silence might make it less real. Poirot walked beside Mercer. "These footprints," he said. "Who discovered them?" "I did, the first morning." "And on the other mornings?" "Usually me. Once the gardener." "They came always from the house?" "Yes." "From which door?" Mercer hesitated. "The east terrace." "Was the door found unlocked?" "No." Poirot stopped. Mercer took another pace before realizing that we were no longer beside him. "The door was locked from inside," Poirot said. "Yes." "And yet the footprints began outside it?" "They began below the drawing-room window." "Ah." It was one of those small sounds which, from Poirot, indicated that an innocent fact had just acquired dangerous company. The house appeared gradually through the trees. Witchbury was an old red-brick building of no great beauty, enlarged by several generations of men who had mistaken size for improvement. Chimneys rose at uneven intervals along the roof. One wing had been shuttered, and many of the upper windows were darkened against air raids. The east terrace overlooked the wood. As we approached, I saw that the ground beneath the drawing-room windows had been carefully covered with boards. "The police?" I asked. Mercer nodded. Sir Claud insisted nothing be disturbed. Poirot crouched at the edge of the terrace. The soil was soft beneath the boards. A line of impressions ran from the house towards the trees. They were narrow and deeply marked at the heel. "A woman's shoes," I said. "Perhaps," said Poirot. "You disagree?" "I distrust shoes, Hastings. They are worn too easily by the wrong people." He studied the first print. It lay directly beneath a tall sash window. No mark of a ladder, no disturbance on the sill. "The window was fastened," Mercer said. "I checked it myself." Poirot stood. "Then either the person who made these prints came through a closed window, or the prints do not record a journey at all." Mercer frowned. "I don't understand." "That is excellent. Understanding too early is the parent of many stupid conclusions." The front door opened before we reached it. Sir Claud Wychbury stood waiting in the hall. He was a broad, heavy man in his late 60s, with white hair and a face that appeared designed for authority, but had lately been obliged to accommodate fear. He greeted Poirot warmly enough, though his eyes moved at once towards the trees behind us. "You saw it?" "I saw the elm," said Poirot, "and I saw the footprints." Sir Claude closed the door. "Come into the library." The hall was cold despite a fire burning in the grate. Several portraits had been removed from the walls, leaving pale rectangles behind. Wartime austerity had affected Witchbury strangely. There were silver candlesticks but no proper coal, ancestral furniture covered in dust sheets, and a telephone positioned beneath a framed notice warning against careless conversation. The library faced west, away from the wood. A woman rose when we entered. She was perhaps 35, with dark hair drawn severely back and an expression of controlled impatience. Sir Claude introduced her as his daughter, Eleanor Witchbury. "So this is the famous detective," she said. "My daughter does not approve of famous people," Sir Claude explained. "I do not approve of importing one when the police are already here." Poirot bowed. "Mademoiselle, I have often found that the police are grateful for assistance. I have often found that famous men believe this." Mercer moved quietly to the window. There was, I thought, some tension between him and Eleanor. Neither looked directly at the other, yet each appeared acutely conscious of where the other stood. Sir Claud lowered himself into a chair. "I wrote to you because of the noises," he said, "before the body was found." "The 3 knocks? You heard them?" "In the wood." Sir Claud rubbed his hands together, though the room was not particularly cold. "The first came 10 days ago. 3 knocks against the east drawing-room window shortly after midnight." "You investigated?" "Of course. There was no one there." "And the next night?" "The same. At precisely 12 minutes past 12. "Precisely?" "The clock had just struck the quarter. I looked at my watch." "Who else heard it?" "Myself, Eleanor, Mercer, Mrs. Gibbons, the housekeeper, and Major Harcourt." "Harcourt?" "A friend. He is staying here while attached to the depot." Eleanor crossed to the fireplace. "You should also tell Monsieur Poirot about the telephone." Sir Claude's jaw tightened. It was probably a fault in the line. "What occurred?" Poirot asked. Eleanor answered. "On the 4th night after the knocking, the telephone rang. My uncle picked it up." "And?" There was no voice, only breathing. "Many people breathe, mademoiselle." "This person was whispering." Sir Claude looked sharply at her. "You said there was no voice?" "There were no words." Poirot's eyes brightened. "What was whispered?" Eleanor stared into the fire. "A tune." The room became very still. I asked, "What tune?" Sir Claude rose abruptly. "It was nonsense. A nursery rhyme, perhaps. The line was poor." Mercer turned from the window. "It was oranges and lemons." Sir Claude looked at him with open anger. Poirot noticed this too. "And after the tune?" "The caller hung up," Mercer said. "Did the calls continue?" "Every night since." "At the same time?" 12 minutes past 12. Poirot walked to the telephone. "Has anyone attempted to trace them?" "The exchange says no call is recorded," Sir Claude replied. "They suggested interference from a military line." Poirot lifted the receiver and listened for a moment. Then he replaced it. "Who knew that the body was in the tree?" "No one," said Sir Claude. The answer came too quickly. Poirot turned towards him. "Sir Claude, I did not ask who knew the body had been found. I asked who knew it was there." A log shifted in the grate. Eleanor closed her eyes. Mercer remained motionless beside the window. Sir Claude's face seemed to sag. Before he could answer, the library door opened. An elderly woman in black stood on the threshold. She was thin, upright, and very pale. Mrs. Gibbons, I assumed. She held a silver tray. Upon it lay a child's wooden whistle. Sir Claude stared at it. "Where did you find that?" Mrs. Gibbons did not enter. "On the east terrace, sir." Poirot stepped closer. The whistle was small and crudely carved, darkened with age. Around its centre someone had wound a thread of red wool. "Was it there earlier?" I asked. "No, sir." Mrs. Gibbons looked towards Sir Claude. "It was placed beneath the drawing-room window." Poirot picked it up with his handkerchief. On one side, 4 letters had been scratched into the wood. "Bell." "The name Bella?" I said. "No," Eleanor replied. Her voice had changed. She was no longer impatient, and she was afraid. "That whistle belonged to my brother." Sir Claude sank back into his chair. Poirot looked from one face to another. "And where is your brother now, mademoiselle?" Eleanor did not answer. It was Mrs. Gibbons who spoke. "Master William died in the wood," she said. Sir Claude struck the arm of his chair. "That is enough." But the housekeeper continued as if she had not heard him. He died 21 years ago. Her eyes moved towards the darkened window. Beneath the wych elm. Chapter 3. The Bell in the Wood. Sir Claude's hand remained upon the arm of his chair. "That is enough." Mrs. Gibbons did not appear to hear him. Her eyes remained fixed upon the darkened window, beyond which the wood had become a single mass of shadow. "Master William died beneath the wych elm," she repeated. Poirot turned the whistle over in his handkerchief. "And the word carved upon it?" Mrs. Gibbons looked at the 4 letters. "Bell." "Yes, madam, I can read it. I ask what it means." Sir Claude rose abruptly. "It means nothing. William was 11 years old. Boys carve words into things." "Not that word," Eleanor said. Her father turned towards her. She had lost the composure with which she had greeted us. Her face was pale, though her voice remained steady. "There used to be a bell in the wood." Mercer moved away from the window. Poirot placed the whistle upon the silver tray. "What sort of bell?" "An iron handbell," Eleanor said. "It hung from the wych elm." I confess that the image disturbed me. The ancient tree, the dark opening in its trunk, and a bell suspended from one of its branches, waiting for an unseen hand. "What purpose did it serve?" I asked. "It summoned the forestry men," Sir Claude replied. "Before the war, before the estate was reduced. There were men working throughout the wood then. The bell called them back for meals, or warned them when timber was being brought down." "And William was interested in it?" Poirot asked. "He was fascinated by it," Eleanor said. "He called the elm the bell tree." Sir Claude gave a weary sigh. "He was a child." "Children," said Poirot, "are often dismissed precisely when they are saying something important." The remark did not please our host. Mrs. Gibbons lifted the whistle from the tray. "Master William used to take this into the wood. He would blow it, and someone would ring the bell in answer." "Who?" "No one ever admitted it." Sir Claude crossed to the drinks table. "The forestry men indulged him." "They denied it," Mrs. Gibbons said. "Then one of the servants." "They denied it too." Eleanor looked at the whistle. "It happened after dark." Sir Claude's glass struck the table. "You were forbidden to go into the wood after dark." "Yes." "Then you could not possibly know." "I heard it from my bedroom." The room fell silent. Poirot studied her. "How many times?" "During the last summer of William's life. Almost every night." "And always after he blew the whistle?" "At first." "At first?" Eleanor glanced at her father. Later, the bell began ringing by itself. Sir Claude made an impatient sound, but there was no conviction in it. Mrs. Gibbons lowered the tray. "3 strokes," she said. I looked at Poirot. "Like the knocking?" "Precisely like the knocking, Hastings." Sir Claude turned towards him. "You cannot seriously imagine that a bell removed 21 years ago is responsible for sounds heard today?" "No." "But someone wishes you to remember it." Poirot pointed to the red wool tied around the whistle. "Was this thread there when William owned it?" Eleanor stepped closer. "No." "You are certain?" "He wore a red scarf that summer. My mother had knitted it. It was found beneath the tree." Sir Claude closed his eyes briefly. Poirot said nothing for several seconds. "What happened on the day your brother died?" Eleanor's hand tightened upon the back of the chair. "He went into the wood after luncheon." "Alone?" "I do not know." "Who found him?" "I did." Sir Claude looked sharply at his daughter, though there was no surprise in his face. "You heard the bell?" Poirot asked. Eleanor nodded. 3 times. I went to the elm because I thought William was calling me. And the whistle? It was not with him. Was the bell still hanging from the tree? No. Mrs. Gibbons crossed herself. Sir Claud saw the gesture and became angry. There was nothing supernatural about William's death. He climbed the tree. A branch gave way. Was the bell ever recovered? Poirot asked. No. Nor the whistle? Eleanor shook her head. Not until today. Poirot looked towards the east-facing windows. So someone has preserved it for 21 years. Or found it recently, Mercer said. It was the first time he had spoken since Mrs. Gibbons entered. Poirot glanced at him. Where might it have been found? Mercer hesitated. Inside the tree. Sir Claude's face altered. It was only for a moment, but I saw it clearly. Fear had become recognition. Poirot saw it too. Why do you say that, monsieur? The body was concealed in the hollow. Whoever placed her there may have found other objects already inside. William used the hollow as a hiding place, Eleanor said quietly. Her father stared at her. What did he hide? Notes, small toys, things he did not wish anyone else to see. Did you examine the hollow after his death? Poirot asked Sir Claude. The police did. And found nothing? Nothing of importance. Poirot's eyebrows rose slightly. Before he could pursue the answer, the library door opened. A tall man in military uniform entered. He was lean, dark-haired, and perhaps in his middle 40s, with the controlled manner of a man accustomed to issuing orders without raising his voice. Forgive the interruption, he said. I was told Monsieur Poirot had arrived. Sir Claude appeared relieved. Major Harcourt, this is Captain Hastings. Harcourt greeted us, then noticed the whistle. His expression did not change, but he stopped walking. Where did you get that? On the terrace, Eleanor said. Harcourt looked towards Sir Claude. I thought it had been destroyed. Poirot's voice was mild. Why should you think so? Harcourt recovered himself. Sir Claude told me. Every eye turned towards our host. Sir Claude's face hardened. I believed it had been burned with William's other effects. But it was not, Poirot said. No. And Major Harcourt knew William? We were distant cousins, Harcourt replied. I often stayed here during school holidays. You remember the bell? Yes. Did you ever ring it in answer to the boy's whistle? No. The answer came too quickly. Poirot merely nodded. Dinner that evening was an uncomfortable affair. At 11:45 we assembled in the east drawing-room. The curtains remained open at Poirot's request. Outside, the terrace was faintly silver beneath a clouded moon. Beyond it stood the wood. Mercer checked the window fastenings. Mrs. Gibbons sat near the door. Eleanor remained beside the fire. Major Harcourt stood with his back to the room, watching the trees. Sir Claude placed his watch upon the mantelpiece. Midnight passed. No one spoke. At 12 minutes past 12, 3 knocks sounded against the centre window. Slow, hollow, evenly spaced. Eleanor caught her breath. Mercer crossed the room and pulled back the window catch. Do not open it, Poirot said. The telephone rang. Sir Claude stared at it. On the 3rd ring, Poirot lifted the receiver. For several seconds he listened. Then, very faintly, a tune emerged from the earpiece. Oranges and lemons. It stopped. From somewhere deep within the wood came the sound of a bell. 1 stroke, then another, then a third. Major Harcourt stepped backwards from the window. On the misted surface of the glass, 4 letters had appeared. Not written from inside the room, written from outside. Bell. Before we begin, a quick message about the future of Nocturnal Tales. Producing these stories takes a considerable amount of time and work. At the moment, we publish only 2 stories each week on YouTube, where our episodes generate no income for the channel. On Patreon, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, however, we release 7 stories every week, 1 every day. Spotify and Apple Podcasts are completely free to listen to, while Patreon membership begins at just $2.99 and directly supports the production of the channel. Our recent releases have featured Hercule Poirot, Sherlock Holmes, Arsène Lupin, The Gentleman Thief Raffles, Violet Strange, and many other great characters from classic detective fiction, alongside 3 completely original Nocturnal Tales mysteries every week. You will also find more forgotten classics from the Midnight Archive and access a back catalogue of over 200 episodes, more than we will ever be able to offer here on YouTube. So if Nocturnal Tales has become part of your evenings and you want to help ensure that it continues, please join us on Patreon or follow and listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You will receive 7 stories every week, and every listen or membership helps us continue producing them. The links are in the description below. And now, let us continue tonight's mystery. Chapter 4. The Path That Was Not There. For several seconds, no one moved. The letters remained upon the window, pale against the darkness beyond. Bell. Mercer reached for the catch. "Wait," Poirot said. He crossed the drawing room and bent close to the glass without touching it. The word had been traced through the moisture on the outside, each letter broad and uneven, as though written by a gloved finger. Major Harcourt glanced towards the terrace. "Whoever did it cannot have gone far." He took an electric torch from his pocket. Poirot straightened. "You may open the window now." Mercer released the catch. The sash swung outward, and cold air entered the room, carrying the smell of damp earth and leaves. Harcourt stepped onto the terrace. I followed him, while Mercer brought a lantern from the hall. The beam of Harcourt's torch moved across the paving stones, the balustrade and the lawn beyond. There was no one there. More remarkable still, there were no fresh footprints beneath the window. The narrow impressions we had examined that afternoon still began below the sill and continued towards the wood. The boards placed over them had been shifted aside for the night, but the surrounding earth remained smooth. Harcourt swept the light towards the trees. "He has reached the wood." "Across wet ground without leaving a mark?" I asked. "There may be a path." "There is no path from this window," Mercer said. Harcourt turned sharply. "You cannot know every inch of the estate." "I know this part." The 2 men looked at one another with a hostility too immediate to have begun that evening. Poirot had joined us. He crouched beside the first of the old impressions, then examined the edge of the terrace. "What do you see?" I asked. "Nothing." "That hardly seems useful." "On the contrary, Hastings. Nothing is sometimes arranged with great care." He returned to the window and inspected the stone sill. A faint smear crossed one corner. Poirot touched it with his handkerchief. "Wax," he said. "Candle wax?" Eleanor asked from inside. "No, a softer wax, the kind used upon thread." Mrs. Gibbons, who stood near the door, made a slight movement. Poirot saw it. "You recognize it?" The housekeeper hesitated. "The gardeners once used waxed cord to suspend the bell from the elm." Sir Claud turned upon her. "That bell was removed 21 years ago." "Yes, sir." "Then the cord cannot possibly concern us." Poirot looked again at the smear. "The wax is fresh." No one answered. He closed the window and fastened it. The telephone stood silent upon the table. The tune had ceased, and the bell in the wood had not sounded again. Yet the room felt less secure than before. Eleanor remained near the fire, staring at the word upon the glass. "William wrote bell everywhere during his last summer," she said. Her father gave an impatient sigh. He was obsessed with the thing. He believed someone rang it for him. "We have discussed this. Not all of it." Sir Claud looked at her. Eleanor's face was pale, but she did not lower her eyes. "The night before he died, William came to my room. He said he had found where the bell was rung from." Poirot turned. He did not believe the sound came from the tree? "No." "What precisely did he say?" Eleanor thought for a moment. "He said, 'The bell is not in the wood when it rings.'" Major Harcourt shifted near the window. Poirot glanced at him before returning his attention to Eleanor. "Did your brother explain?" "No, I thought it was another of his games. And the following day he died." "Yes." Sir Claud crossed to the drinks table. "You are attaching importance to the confused remarks of an excitable child." Poirot looked at him mildly. "You invited me here because someone knocks upon your windows at 12 minutes past 12 and telephones you with nursery rhymes. Confusion has already received a very generous invitation." Sir Claud poured himself a drink. Mercer moved towards the curtains. "There is something else." He drew one curtain fully aside and pointed to the wall beside the window. A thin line ran vertically through the wallpaper. It was nearly invisible except where the damp night air had darkened it. Poirot approached. "The wall has been altered," Mercer said. "This section is newer than the rest." "How new?" I asked. "Not new in the ordinary sense, perhaps 30 or 40 years. Sir Claude's glass struck the table. "There was once a servant's passage there." Eleanor looked at him. "You never mentioned it." "It was closed before you were born." "Where did it lead?" Poirot asked. "To the old service stair." "And from there?" "The east corridor, the kitchen yard." "Not the terrace?" "No." Poirot tapped the wall. The sound was hollow. Sir Claude's expression hardened. "The passage was sealed." "By whom?" "My father." "For what reason?" "It was unnecessary." Poirot smiled faintly. Large houses rarely surrender useful passages merely because they are unnecessary. Mrs. Gibbons spoke quietly. "There was an accident." Sir Claud turned. "That story is irrelevant." "What accident?" I asked. The housekeeper folded her hands. "A maid was found unconscious inside the passage. She said someone had followed her from the wood." "When was this?" Poirot asked. "Before the Great War." "And the passage was sealed afterwards?" "Yes." Sir Claude shook his head. "It was sealed because the plaster was unsafe." Mrs. Gibbons did not contradict him. She did not need to. Poirot examined the edge of the wallpaper and found a small brass catch hidden behind the curtain. It moved beneath his thumb. A narrow section of wall opened inward without a sound. Cold air flowed into the drawing-room. Behind the panel lay a passage scarcely wide enough for one man. Dust covered the floor, but not evenly. A narrow strip along one side had recently been disturbed. Mercer lifted the lantern. The passage ran into darkness. "You said it was sealed," Eleanor said. Sir Claude stared at the opening. It was. Poirot stepped inside. We followed him in single file. Mercer with the lantern, then myself, Eleanor, and Harcourt. Sir Claude remained in the drawing-room with Mrs. Gibbons. The passage smelled of dust, damp wood, and extinguished candles. After perhaps 20 feet it turned sharply. A flight of narrow stairs descended towards the ground floor. Poirot stopped at the first step. Upon the dust lay the print of a woman's heel. Only one. There was no second impression before it or beyond it. "The same shoe," I whispered. "Or the same heel," Poirot corrected. Mercer lowered the lantern. Beside the print lay a length of waxed cord. A few strands of red wool clung to it. Eleanor gripped the wall. The thread from William's whistle. "Of the same kind," Poirot said. "We must not promote resemblance into certainty." The stairs ended at a low door. Beyond it was a small, disused room beneath the east terrace. Rusted hooks covered one wall. Upon another remained the faded outline of tools long removed. In the center of the room stood a wooden frame supporting a system of wheels and cords. One cord disappeared upwards into the ceiling. Another passed through the outer wall. Poirot followed it to a narrow iron pipe. Mercer held the lantern closer. "The forestry bell," he said. Sir Claud had entered behind us. "No." His voice echoed strangely in the little room. Poirot looked at him. "You recognize the mechanism?" Sir Claude's face had lost all color. "It was dismantled years ago." "But not entirely." Poirot touched one of the wheels. It turned smoothly. Fresh oil gleamed upon the axle. Harcourt examined the cord leading through the wall. "It must run beneath the terrace." "And perhaps farther," Poirot said. "To the tree?" I asked. "Once, certainly." He pulled the cord gently. From somewhere in the wood came a single faint stroke of the bell. Eleanor gave a cry. No one else moved. The sound faded among the trees. Poirot released the cord. "So," he said, "the bell need never have been rung by anyone standing beneath the elm." He turned to Sir Claude. "William discovered this room, did he not?" "I do not know." "He said the bell was not in the wood when it rang." Sir Claude's eyes fixed upon the mechanism. "He may have found the passage. And what else did he find?" "I have told you everything." Poirot looked at him for a long moment. "No, monsieur. You have told me only what 21 years have made safe." Mercer raised the lantern towards the far wall. Something had been written there in chalk. The letters were small, unlike the broad word upon the window, and low enough to have been made by a child. "William knows." Below them, someone had recently added 4 darker letters. "Bell." A clock began striking somewhere in the house above us. It struck once, then stopped. Mercer looked at his watch. 12:23. The house clock was 11 minutes slow. From the passage behind us came 3 knocks, slow, hollow, evenly spaced. Poirot raised one finger for silence. The knocks came again. Not from the drawing-room, not from the wood, from inside the wall at our backs. Then a woman's voice whispered through the iron pipe, "Ask him what William saw." Chapter 5. What William Saw. The whisper travelled through the iron pipe with dreadful clarity. "Ask him what William saw." Eleanor turned towards her father. Sir Claude did not move. The words seemed to remain in the little room after the voice had ceased, suspended between the walls like smoke. Major Harcourt seized the pipe. "Who is there?" His shout vanished into it. No answer came. Poirot raised one hand. "Do not speak again." Harcourt released the pipe. Poirot bent close to its open end and listened. His face revealed nothing. At last, he straightened. The voice came from the wood. "You can tell that?" I asked. "I can tell that the pipe descends before it rises. The sound carries from a lower point." "The elm?" Mercer said. "Perhaps." Sir Claude turned towards the passage. "We have had enough of this." Poirot stepped into his path. "On the contrary, monsieur, we have had almost nothing." "You heard the message?" Yes. Then whoever is doing this wishes to accuse me. No. Whoever is doing this wishes you to speak. Sir Claude's expression hardened. There is nothing to say. Eleanor stared at him. Father. He did not look at her. Poirot lifted the lantern from Mercer and examined the machinery more closely. The frame supporting the cords had been built against the outer wall. Most of the timber was grey with age, but one pulley was new. So was the narrow iron hook fastening the cord beneath it. Poirot touched the wood. Sawdust. A pale sprinkling lay beneath the frame. Someone repaired this recently, I said. Yes. Mercer? Sir Claude demanded. The secretary's face flushed. I have never seen this room. You found the footprints. I found them because they were there. You brought Poirot to the elm. At your request. Sir Claude's anger came too quickly and fell upon Mercer with the force of something long restrained. You have had the run of this house for 3 years. You know every account, every key, every weakness in the walls. Mercer met his gaze. Not every weakness. Eleanor spoke sharply. That is enough. The two men fell silent. Poirot, who had watched them with interest, turned to the words upon the wall. William knows. The chalk marks were uneven and badly faded. He held the lantern close. Eleanor. She came forward reluctantly. Is that your brother's handwriting? I cannot be certain. He was 11. Did he form his W in this manner? Poirot pointed to the first letter. Its central strokes crossed rather than meeting cleanly. Eleanor studied it. Yes. And the S? He often wrote it backwards when he was excited. The final letter in nose was indeed reversed. Sir Claude looked away. Poirot indicated the darker word beneath it. And Bell? That is not William's hand, Eleanor said. No. The newer letters had been written heavily with squared edges. The chalk had broken beneath the pressure, leaving white fragments on the floor. Poirot picked one up. Recent, he said. Harcourt looked toward the passage. Then our intruder has been inside the house. Certainly. How? The same way we came. But the panel was hidden. Hidden things are frequently known to more people than their owners suppose. Sir Claude's voice was low. The outer end of the pipe must still be accessible. Poirot nodded. We shall examine it. Now? Now. The passage beyond the machinery room did not continue towards the wood. Instead, the iron pipe passed through the wall and disappeared beneath the foundations. We were obliged to return to the drawing room. Mrs. Gibbons stood exactly where we had left her. She looked at our faces and seemed to understand at once that something had changed. You heard her, she said. Sir Claude stopped. Hear whom? The housekeeper lowered her eyes. No one, sir. Poirot approached her. Mrs. Gibbons, who used the passage before it was sealed. The servants. All the servants? No, it connected the nursery stair with the terrace room. The nursery maids used it most often. Why? To reach the garden without bringing the children through the main house. And in 1922? Mrs. Gibbons hesitated. Miss Bell used it. The name produced a different reaction in each of them. Eleanor went pale. Mercer looked confused. Sir Claude closed his eyes. Harcourt alone remained expressionless. Poirot's voice was quiet. Who was Miss Bell? No, Sir Claude said. Poirot did not turn. Mrs. Gibbons folded her hands more tightly. She was William's governess. Eleanor stared at her. William had no governess called Bell. You were away at school when she came. For how long? 3 months. And when did she leave? Mrs. Gibbons looked towards Sir Claud. The day after Master William died. No one spoke. Poirot removed the child's whistle from his pocket. He had brought it from the drawing-room before we entered the passage. Then the word carved upon this object may be a name after all. Sir Claud shook his head. No. Mrs. Gibbons looked at the whistle. She gave it to him. The earlier explanation of the bell in the wood seemed to shift beneath our feet without disappearing entirely. William called the tree the bell tree, Eleanor said. He wrote bell because of the bell. Children, Poirot replied, are fond of one word having two meanings. Sir Claud crossed the room and poured himself another drink. Miss Bell was dismissed. For what reason? Poirot asked. Insolence. Mrs. Gibbons spoke before he could stop her. She accused someone in the house of frightening William. Sir Claud turned upon her. You were not present. I heard the quarrel. What did she say? Poirot asked. Mrs. Gibbons's lips trembled. She said Master William had seen a woman carried through the wood. The fire settled with a soft collapse. Eleanor gripped the mantelpiece. Carried? She said he had followed the bell cord to its end. He had found the iron door beneath the roots. Poirot's eyes sharpened. What iron door? Mrs. Gibbons shook her head. I never saw it. William did. That was what Miss Bell claimed. Sir Claud drank. She was hysterical. And the woman? I asked. Mrs. Gibbons looked towards the dark window. William said she was asleep. No one needed to ask where. Poirot crossed to the telephone. Mrs. Gibbons, what was Miss Bell's Christian name? The housekeeper hesitated. Isabel. Not Bella? No. What became of her? She left before breakfast. Her room was empty. Did she take her belongings? Some. Not all. Mrs. Gibbons shook her head. She left a coat, 2 books, a case beneath the bed. What was in the case? It disappeared before the police came. Sir Claud set down his glass. There was no case. Mrs. Gibbons looked at him for the first time. Yes, sir. The words were respectful. They were also absolute. Poirot turned to Harcourt. You were staying here that summer. I was. Did you know Isabel Bell? Slightly. Did you quarrel with her? No. Mrs. Gibbons said nothing, but her eyes moved towards him. Harcourt saw. You have something to add? No, Major. Then do not look at me like that. Poirot smiled faintly. People cannot always govern their eyes. Harcourt's jaw tightened. Eleanor crossed to Mrs. Gibbons. Why was none of this told to me? You were 15, miss. Sir Claud said Master William had fallen. The doctor agreed. There seemed no kindness in giving you another story. Another story, Poirot repeated. He looked towards Sir Claud. How many were there? Before Sir Claud could answer, the telephone rang. Every person in the room froze. Poirot looked at the mantel clock. 12:37, I said. Not 12 minutes past 12. For the first time the caller had broken the pattern. Poirot lifted the receiver. There was no breathing, no nursery tune, only a woman's voice. Come to the tree. The line went dead. At that same moment something struck the outside of the drawing-room window. Once. We turned. A small object lay upon the terrace. Mercer opened the window and retrieved it. It was a key. Old iron, black with rust. A strip of red wool had been tied through its bow. Poirot took it. The iron door, Eleanor whispered. Sir Claud moved forward. No one is going into that wood. Poirot looked at him. You recognize the key? No. You are afraid of what it opens. I'm afraid of another death. Poirot slipped the key into his pocket. "Then perhaps, monsieur, you should finally tell us about the first one." Sir Claude's face became grey. Before he could reply, 3 strokes of the bell sounded from the wood. Then a 4th. The extra note was louder than the others. It rang through the glass and seemed to vibrate inside the walls. Mrs. Gibbons whispered, "That was William's signal." Poirot turned towards her. "What did it mean?" She looked at Sir Claude. It meant he had found someone. Chapter 6. The Woman in the Tree. For several moments after the 4th stroke of the bell had died away, no one in the drawing-room spoke. The silence possessed a different quality now. Until that instant we had all been listening for something outside the house. Now every eye had turned inward, towards Sir Claude, towards Major Harcourt, and towards Poirot himself. The little Belgian detective slipped the rusted key into his pocket and looked first at Mrs. Gibbons. "You told us something very important, madam," he said quietly. "When William rang the bell 4 times, it meant that he had found someone." The old housekeeper nodded, though tears were already gathering in her eyes. "He always used 4 strokes for that, sir." Poirot inclined his head. "Then let us begin with William, for I believe everyone in this house has spent 21 years asking the wrong question." Sir Claude straightened in his chair. "My son died by accident." "I agree." The answer seemed to astonish everyone except Mrs. Gibbons. Poirot folded his hands behind his back and began walking slowly across the room. "The evidence has always pointed in that direction. William's body was never concealed. There were no injuries suggesting violence. The doctor's verdict satisfied the police because it was, in all probability, correct. William climbed where he ought not to have climbed, and he fell." He turned towards Eleanor. "But accidents do not happen without causes. They happen because someone chooses to climb a tree, or explore a hidden passage, or follow an old bell cord into the woods." Eleanor nodded slowly. He had become obsessed with the bell that summer. Precisely. Every memory we have heard points in the same direction: the whistle, the mysterious answering bell, the hidden passage, the words upon the wall. They are not clues invented after the event. They are the ordinary world of an intelligent little boy who believed he had discovered a great adventure. Poirot smiled sadly. And at the end of that adventure he rang 4 times. Mrs. Gibbons clasped her hands together. He'd found someone. Yes. Not because he was frightened, but because he was delighted. William believed he had discovered the secret of the bell, and then, beneath the elm, he found someone lying there. He hurried towards her, climbed where he should not have climbed, and lost his footing. Sir Claude had covered his face with one hand. "I never listened to him," he murmured. "No," said Poirot gently. "That has been your punishment. For 21 years you have imagined that your son's last hours concealed some dreadful mystery. In reality they concealed only the tragedy of a child whose curiosity exceeded his caution. I confess that I felt an extraordinary sense of relief. William had not been murdered after all. Yet the relief lasted only a moment, for another question immediately presented itself. If William died accidentally, I said, then what became of Miss Bell? Poirot looked at me. An excellent question, Hastings, and the answer has been before us since yesterday afternoon. He turned once more towards Mrs. Gibbons. You told us Miss Bell disappeared without taking her travelling case. That is not the action of a woman running away. A governess who intends to leave may abandon her position. She does not abandon her possessions. Mrs. Gibbons nodded miserably. I knew something was wrong. So did Sir Claude. Every eye turned towards the old man. Sir Claude did not attempt to deny it. I searched, he said quietly. For 3 days. I searched every part of the estate. But you informed no one. My son had just been buried. His voice cracked. I could not endure another tragedy. When no trace of her was found, I persuaded myself she had fled. Poirot shook his head. No, monsieur. You persuaded yourself that she must have fled because every other explanation was unbearable. For a long while, Sir Claude said nothing. Then he gave a weary nod. Yes. Poirot allowed the silence to settle before continuing. That lie, though born of grief rather than malice, had dreadful consequences. Once everyone believed Miss Bell had gone away of her own accord. No proper search was ever made. The years passed. Servants left. Memories faded. At last, only Mrs. Gibbons continued to doubt. The old housekeeper lowered her eyes. I prayed she had escaped. But she had not. Poirot's voice became quieter still. She had never left Witchbury. He turned slowly towards Major Harcourt. You, Major, knew that better than anyone. Harcourt met his gaze calmly. I have already told you that I scarcely knew the woman. That, said Poirot, is perhaps the least convincing statement you have made since our arrival. A faint flush appeared upon the Major's face. You recognized William's whistle immediately. You knew it had supposedly been destroyed. Mrs. Gibbons looked at you every time Miss Bell was mentioned. At first I believed she suspected you of frightening William. Only later did I understand that her memory had carried her back 21 years. Poirot drew the fragment of white chalk from his pocket. And then there were the words William wrote upon the wall. He pointed towards the faded inscription. William knows. Eleanor recognized her brother's peculiar handwriting. Those words were genuine. Someone later added Bell beneath them, hoping we should interpret the message incorrectly. Mercer looked puzzled. You mean William really knew something? Yes, said Poirot, but not what everyone imagined. He did not witness a murder. He merely found Miss Bell. The room seemed to grow colder. Poirot continued quietly. Young people often seek privacy where they imagine no one will disturb them. The hidden clearing beside the elm was such a place. Isabel Bell and Major Harcourt met there frequently. Mrs. Gibbons remembered the friendship. Sir Claude, occupied with estate affairs, paid it little attention. Harcourt's expression had begun to change. The confidence with which he had met every previous accusation slowly ebbed away. You quarrelled, Poirot said. About what I cannot say with certainty. Perhaps marriage. Perhaps your future. Perhaps she wished to leave Witchbury and you refused to let her go. The precise subject matters very little. What matters is that tempers rose. For the first time Harcourt spoke. You cannot know any of this. I know enough. There were no marks suggesting deliberate violence. Had you intended murder, you would not have hidden her hurriedly in the nearest place available. Everything speaks, instead of panic. Poirot's voice remained almost compassionate. You caught her arm as she turned away. She struggled to free herself. She stumbled against the exposed roots beneath the elm and struck her head. Harcourt closed his eyes. It happened so quickly, he said. No one interrupted him. She looked at me. Then she simply fell. His voice had become scarcely audible. I thought she had only stunned herself. By the time I knelt beside her. He stopped. I heard William's whistle. Mrs. Gibbons gave a little cry. I hid Isabel in the hollow. I meant to return after dark and take her away. He looked towards the window. But before I could, the boy found her. Poirot nodded. He rang 4 strokes to announce his discovery, then climbed towards the hollow in his excitement. You called out to him, hoping to stop him. I shouted his name. and he turned too suddenly. Harcourt bowed his head. He slipped. The silence that followed seemed endless. When they found William, Harcourt said at last, nothing else mattered. The whole house mourned the child. No one searched for Isabel any longer. No, said Poirot softly. Grief concealed your crime more effectively than any plan you could have devised. At length Mercer stepped forward. I found Sir Claude's correspondence while cataloguing the estate, he said miserably. Letters referring to Miss Bell that simply stopped. Contradictions in the servants' accounts. I became convinced Sir Claude knew the truth and had buried it with William. So you created the haunting, Poirot said. Mercer nodded. The bell, the telephone, the footprints, the writing on the window. I wanted to force him to confess. You had no idea the body was still inside the tree. None. When the boys found the skeleton, I realized too late what I had uncovered. Sir Claude looked at the young secretary for a long time. You were wrong about me, he said at last. I know. But because of you, she has finally been found. No one answered. As Poirot and I left Witchbury a little later, the first light of dawn was filtering through Hagley Wood. The wych elm stood quietly among the beeches, stripped at last of all the dreadful imaginings that had gathered about it through the years. So William never discovered a murderer, I said as we reached the gate. No, Hastings, replied Poirot. He discovered only a woman who needed help. And the real mystery? Poirot glanced back towards the old house. The real mystery, my friend, was not how a body came to rest inside a tree. It was how grief persuaded honest people to stop asking where one poor woman had gone. He walked on in silence, and I could not help thinking that of all the tragedies I had seen him unravel, none had begun with greater innocence than the curiosity of an 11-year-old boy. Epilogue, the real mystery of Bella in the wych elm. The mystery that inspired this story remains one of Britain's most haunting unsolved murder cases. On the 18th of April, 1943, 4 local boys were exploring Hagley Wood in Worcestershire when one of them climbed an old wych elm in search of birds' nests. Looking into the hollow trunk, he was horrified to discover a human skull. Fearing they might be blamed for trespassing, the boys initially told no one, but the discovery was soon reported to the police. Inside the hollow tree lay the nearly complete skeleton of a woman. She had been carefully concealed within the trunk, and a piece of taffeta had been forced into her mouth before death or immediately afterwards, suggesting she had been suffocated. A wedding ring, fragments of clothing, and a few personal possessions were recovered, but nothing that revealed her identity. Investigators believed she had died at least 18 months earlier. Then, just as newspapers began reporting the discovery, mysterious graffiti started appearing across Birmingham and the surrounding area. The message was always much the same. Who put Bella in the wych elm? No one knew who had written it. More importantly, no one knew who Bella was. The unknown author clearly recognized the victim, yet never came forward to explain the message. Instead, the words spread from wall to wall across the Midlands, becoming one of the most famous pieces of criminal graffiti in British history. Over the decades, investigators have proposed numerous identities for the woman. One theory suggested she was Bella, or Lubella, Sherman, a local sex worker who disappeared during the war. Another claimed she was a Dutch woman involved with wartime espionage. Others believed she had been murdered by a traveling criminal, while some suspected members of Birmingham's underworld. None of these theories has ever been proved. The identity of Bella remains officially unknown. The strangest aspect of the case may not be the body itself, but the certainty with which somebody knew the victim's nickname. Whoever first wrote the question upon a wall possessed knowledge the police apparently did not. Whether that person was the killer, An accomplice, a friend, or merely someone who recognized the description has never been established. The case has inspired countless books, documentaries, and investigations, yet more than 80 years later no one has been charged, no victim has been conclusively identified, and the question that first appeared in chalk during the spring of 1943 remains unanswered. Who put Bella in the wych elm? No one knows. Thank you for listening all the way to the end of The Secret of the Bell Tree. There was a death at the center of this case, but not the one the house had spent 21 years imagining. William was never silenced. He was a curious boy who rang his bell 4 times because he had found someone and then climbed where he should not have climbed. What lingers is how much damage a kind lie can do. Sir Claud searched for 3 days, told no one, and let himself believe that Isabel Bell had run away, because every other explanation was unbearable so soon after burying his son. That one act of self-protection meant no proper search was ever made. Grief hid Harcourt's crime far more effectively than any plan he could have devised. And then there is William's code. The whistle, the answering bell, the 4 strokes, the word chalked on the wall. For 21 years, the adults read it as a warning left by a frightened child. It was nothing of the kind. It was a boy's delighted signal that he had found someone who needed help. And the only person in the world who understood it was the man who had put her there. If you stayed for the epilogue, you know that the tree was real. In April of 1943, 4 boys really did find a woman's skeleton inside a hollow wych elm in Hagley Wood, with a piece of taffeta forced into her mouth. Within weeks, the question began appearing in chalk across the Midlands. More than 80 years later, no one has been charged, no one has identified her, and no one has ever explained how the writer knew her name. If this mystery stayed with you, tell us in the comments when you first suspected the Major, and whether you think Sir Claud's silence was forgivable, given what he had just buried. And if you want to help us keep making these long-form mysteries with the research, writing, narration, editing, and atmosphere they deserve, the best way to support Nocturnal Tales is by joining us on Patreon. For just $2.99 a month, you get every episode ad-free, early access to new cases, and you help us keep creating these stories without commercial breaks cutting through the suspense. The Patreon link is the first one in the description. For now, thank you again for staying with us to the last line. Until the next case, listen to the children who tell you they have found something. Distrust the explanation that hurts the least. And remember, some questions go unanswered not because they are difficult, but because everyone quietly agreed to stop asking.